Steelers Nation, come on in. The conversation around the Pittsburgh Steelers quarterback future is no longer theory, no longer something distant. It's happening right now. And every decision from this point forward can shape the direction of this franchise for years to come. We're talking about a championship window, about urgency, about an organization that knows its own history and understands that time waits for no one. Drafting a quarterback? That's absolutely on the table. But everything coming out of league circles, and everything that makes sense from a roster-building perspective, points to one unavoidable truth. The Steelers are expected to enter the 2026 season with a veteran quarterback starting from week 1. This isn't improvisation. It's strategy. It's experience. It's timing. Right now, the question isn't if the Steelers are going to make a move. The real question is, how and with who? Do you trust this approach? Would you rather see a proven veteran or go all in on the draft? Drop your take in the comments, because your voice is part of this conversation. Stick with me until the end, because in this video we're breaking down the signals, the subtext, and what's really taking shape behind the scenes in Pittsburgh. And if you're true Steelers Nation, smash that like button, support the channel, and let's get into it. At the center of all of this is Cam Hayward. Next season lines up as the final year of his current contract, and by his own words, it strongly signals the closing chapter of his Hall of Fame caliber career in Pittsburgh. The Steelers know exactly what that means. You are not rebuilding during a farewell season like that. You are not experimenting. You are pushing chips to the middle of the table and doing everything possible to give a cornerstone player one final legitimate shot at a Super Bowl. That context changes how the quarterback position is viewed. It is not about long-term development alone. It is about who gives this team the best chance to win right now. When you talk about the absolute best-case scenario, one name stands above all others: Matthew Stafford. If we are being honest with ourselves, Stafford represents the highest possible ceiling of any quarterback who could even remotely become available next offseason. He is playing at an MVP caliber level, firmly in the conversation with the league's elite, and he remains one of the few quarterbacks in football who has already proven he can take a team all the way and finish the job. He has a Super Bowl ring. He has delivered a game-winning drive on the biggest stage. He is still performing at a level that places him just behind the very top tier of quarterbacks in the NFL. From a purely football standpoint, Stafford would instantly make the Steelers a legitimate Super Bowl contender. There is no projection required. There is no guesswork. You know exactly what you are getting: elite arm talent, command of the offense, poise under pressure, and the ability to win in January. Pair that with a roster that is already built to compete, and the logic becomes obvious. If your goal is to maximize the final run of Cam Hayward's career, Stafford is the quarterback who gives you the clearest path. The problem, of course, is availability. As things stand right now, the odds of Stafford actually being obtainable are extremely slim. The Rams are playing very good football and remain firmly in their own championship window. Teams simply do not trade MVP-level quarterbacks when they are trying to win Super Bowls themselves. The only scenario where this even becomes plausible is if Los Angeles somehow lands a younger superstar to replace him, and the only name that realistically fits that description is Joe Burrow. But that scenario collapses under scrutiny just as quickly. Cincinnati would have to entertain moving one of the most valuable quarterbacks in the league, something that would only happen if Burrow himself demanded it. And if that were to occur, the Bengals would almost certainly bend over backwards to keep him happy, whether that means coaching changes or structural shifts within the organization. That is why, despite Stafford being the dream scenario, the chances of it actually materializing are extremely low, well below realistic expectations. Still, even a small percentage chance is enough for it to be discussed, because when you are talking about maximizing a championship window, you explore every avenue, even the unlikely ones. The Steelers would be irresponsible not to at least monitor that situation closely, because if Stafford were to become available, he would instantly change everything. And that is where the conversation truly begins, because once you move past the dream scenario, you are left with the real, practical decisions that will define the Steelers' direction. The team does not have the luxury of waiting indefinitely or hoping a miracle falls into their lap. They must identify veteran options who can realistically be acquired, who fit the culture, who can operate within the system, and who can elevate the roster without crippling future flexibility. That is the lens through which every quarterback option must be viewed, and it is why the debate inside the fan base is only going to intensify from here. So when you step back and look at the stakes, the timeline, and the names involved, this is not just another offseason quarterback discussion. This is about legacy, urgency, and the final push of a core that has given everything to this franchise. With that in mind, how do you personally view the Steelers' best path forward at quarterback for 2026, knowing what is on the line and how narrow this window really is? Once you move past the unlikely dream of a blockbuster trade and focus on what the Steelers can realistically control, the conversation sharpens quickly, and it brings us directly to the most important and most probable figure in this entire discussion, Aaron Rodgers. Right now, Rodgers is not a placeholder, he is not a stopgap, and he is not a short-term experiment. He is the current starting quarterback of the Pittsburgh Steelers, and based on performance, fit, and timing, he remains the clearest and most logical option to be the Week 1 starter again in 2026. What matters most here is not reputation or past accolades alone, it is how Rodgers is playing right now and how his presence is directly impacting the structure of the offense. Statistically, he is sitting around the top third of the league in passer rating, which is remarkable considering his age. More importantly, he is not the problem on offense. He is executing efficiently, protecting the football, and doing exactly what this team needs from the quarterback position. His experience shows up in subtle but critical ways that don't always dominate highlight reels but absolutely decide games, especially late in the season. One of the biggest differences Rodgers brings is how he helps the offensive line. The ball comes out quickly. The pre-snap recognition is elite. The offense avoids drive-killing sacks that plagued this team in previous seasons when quarterbacks held the ball too long. As a result, the Steelers currently sit among the lowest pressure rates allowed in the league, and that is not a coincidence. That is quarterback-driven efficiency. In the AFC North, especially in December and January, that matters more than almost anything else. Then there is the financial and roster-building side of the equation. Rodgers is not commanding top-of-market money. At this stage of his career, he is someone you can bring back on a reasonable deal, allowing the front office to continue stacking talent around him. That flexibility is critical if the organization truly wants to push all in for one final championship run during Cam Hayward's last season. You are getting a Hall of Fame quarterback, playoff-tested, Super Bowl-tested, without sacrificing the ability to reinforce the rest of the roster. There is also the human element that cannot be ignored. If the Steelers make the playoffs and Rodgers finishes this season strong, it is not difficult to imagine Cam Hayward personally picking up the phone and saying, "One more year, one more run, let's do this together." That matters in a locker room. It matters to Mike Tomlin. It matters to a roster that has fully bought into Rodgers as their leader. Chemistry like that is not easily replicated by bringing in a new quarterback every offseason. But the Steelers are not an organization that operates with blinders on, and they will explore alternatives, especially those that offer longer-term upside. One of the most intriguing names in that category is Kyler Murray. He is polarizing, no question about it, but the talent is undeniable. A former number 1 overall pick, Murray has already shown stretches of MVP-level play in this league. He is dynamic, dangerous as a runner, and capable of creating offense when structure breaks down. From a profile standpoint, Murray checks several boxes that align closely with what Mike Tomlin has historically valued. Mobility matters. The ability to extend plays matters. And Murray still has years ahead of him, not behind him. At just 28 years old, trading for him would not be about a one-year window. It would be about potentially securing the position for the next decade if things break right. His contract situation also means that if the Cardinals decide to move on, he would likely be available at a price far below what quarterbacks of his pedigree usually cost. There are legitimate concerns, of course. His tendency to avoid the middle of the field, the inconsistency, the questions about long-term fit. But there is also a very real possibility that a stable organization like Pittsburgh could unlock a more consistent version of Murray than what we have seen in Arizona. The Steelers have a track record of maximizing talent through structure, and that alone makes this a scenario worth serious consideration. Beyond Murray, there are quieter names that may not excite the fan base but cannot be dismissed. Geno Smith is one of them. His season in Las Vegas has been ugly, but context matters. The Raiders' roster has collapsed on multiple levels, and very few quarterbacks would succeed in that environment. We have seen quarterbacks resurrect their careers by moving from chaos to stability, and Pittsburgh represents exactly that kind of environment. Geno has arm strength, experience, and familiarity with receivers like DK Metcalf. On a cheap deal, he could represent a low-risk, potentially higher-reward option, especially if paired with a rookie quarterback developing behind him. Then there is Mac Jones, who has looked efficient and accurate within Kyle Shanahan's system. The concern there is whether that production is scheme-driven and whether his arm talent is sufficient for cold-weather football in the AFC North. Accuracy and decision-making are valuable, but December football in Pittsburgh often demands velocity and toughness that not every quarterback possesses. When you put all of this together, the picture becomes clearer. The Steelers are not searching for a savior. They are searching for the right fit at the right moment. Everything points to Aaron Rodgers being the safest, most logical, and most aligned option for 2026, especially if the mission is to give this core one final, legitimate shot at a championship. Other names may tempt, intrigue, or divide opinion, but none currently match the combination of performance, leadership, cost, and continuity that Rodgers brings to the table. What makes this situation even more fascinating is that the Steelers are operating in a space they haven't truly been in for years, a space where they are competitive enough to demand certainty at quarterback, but realistic enough to understand that certainty does not always mean youth. This is not a roster begging for development time. This is a roster that is built to win games right now, with veterans across the defense, established playmakers on offense, and a head coach who has never believed in wasting seasons. That context matters because it explains why the Steelers' thinking is far more calculated than emotional when it comes to the quarterback position. If you strip away the noise, the social media debates, and the hypothetical fantasy scenarios, the organizational philosophy becomes easier to read. The Steelers value stability. They value leadership. They value quarterbacks who can handle pressure without panicking, especially when the games matter most. That is why Aaron Rodgers continues to loom so large over every other option. He does not require an adjustment period. He does not need the offense simplified for him. He understands protections, he understands coverage rotations, and he understands how to win ugly games in bad weather. Those traits translate directly to December football in Pittsburgh. There is also the reality that drafting a quarterback does not eliminate the need for a veteran starter. In fact, it reinforces it. If the Steelers select a quarterback early in the draft, the worst possible situation would be forcing that player onto the field before he is ready, especially during a season where expectations are championship level. Sitting behind a veteran like Rodgers, learning the system, learning the rhythm of the league, and developing without pressure is the exact path that organizations preach but rarely execute properly. Pittsburgh has the chance to do it the right way. This is where some fans underestimate how much continuity matters. A second year in the same system can be transformative, not just for the quarterback, but for the entire offense. Timing improves, trust improves, communication improves, receivers play faster, offensive linemen play more confidently. Those marginal gains add up, and they often become the difference between a playoff exit and a legitimate Super Bowl run. The Steelers understand that, and it is why running things back with the right veteran is not a conservative move, it is a strategic one. At the same time, the front office will not ignore value. If an opportunity presents itself where a younger quarterback with upside becomes available at the right price, they will explore it. That is why names like Kyler Murray remain relevant, even if they are not the favorite. The Steelers are disciplined, but they are not rigid. They will adapt if the market shifts. What they will not do is chase a name without a clear plan or disrupt the locker room chemistry that has been carefully built. Ultimately, everything circles back to the same truth. The Steelers are preparing for a season that carries emotional weight, competitive urgency, and legacy implications. Cam Hayward's timeline sets the clock. The defense is still capable of championship-level play. The offense has enough pieces to succeed if led properly. The quarterback decision is the final lever, and how they pull it will define not just one season, but the narrative of this era of Steelers football. There is one final layer to this discussion that cannot be ignored, and it is the pressure that comes with expectations inside this building. The Steelers are not a franchise that sells patience to its fan base. They sell competitiveness. Every season, every week. That culture shapes decision-making more than any mock draft or off-season narrative ever could. When you walk into that locker room, the standard is clear, and the quarterback is expected to meet it immediately. That reality naturally narrows the list of viable options. This is why the idea of rolling into 2026 with uncertainty at quarterback simply does not align with how this organization operates. The Steelers do not want a season defined by learning curves, weekly debates, or mid-season resets. They want clarity. They want command. They want a quarterback who can take ownership of the huddle when things get tight, when injuries hit, when the schedule turns brutal, and when the weather turns cold. That is not theory. That is lived experience in this division. It also explains why the front office would likely be comfortable layering solutions rather than betting everything on one move. A veteran starter paired with a drafted quarterback creates leverage, insurance, and flexibility. If the veteran plays well, you compete immediately. If the rookie develops faster than expected, you have options. That dual-track approach protects the team from disaster while keeping the long-term future intact. It is pragmatic, disciplined, and very much in line with how Pittsburgh prefers to operate. From that perspective, bringing back Aaron Rodgers for another season is not nostalgia or comfort. It is calculated risk management. You know the floor. You understand the ceiling. You can build the roster around that knowledge instead of reacting to uncertainty. Every other option, whether it is a trade for a younger quarterback or a reclamation project, introduces volatility. Some teams need volatility. The Steelers do not. They need dependability in a season where the margin for error will be razor thin. And make no mistake, the AFC is not getting easier. The path to a Super Bowl will require winning against elite quarterbacks, hostile environments, and high-pressure moments. You do not survive that path without a quarterback who has been there before, who understands situational football, and who does not flinch when the season is on the line. That is the lens through which every decision must be judged. What happens next will define how this era of Steelers football is remembered. Was this the group that maximized its opportunity, honored its leaders, and took one last legitimate swing at a championship? Or was it a team that hesitated at the most important position on the field? That answer will come down to how decisive and aligned the organization is in the months ahead. What ultimately separates this moment from past quarterback debates is that there is no room left for ambiguity. The Steelers are staring directly at a crossroads where every decision has consequences that ripple beyond one season. This is not about winning 9 or 10 games and staying competitive. This is about whether the organization truly believes this core can finish the job, or whether it quietly accepts a transitional phase disguised as contention. That distinction matters, and it starts under center. Inside the building, the message is already clear. This team believes it can win now. You do not talk about legacy seasons, farewell runs, and championship urgency unless you believe the pieces are in place. The defense still sets the tone. The offensive structure is stable. The locker room is aligned. What remains is ensuring that the quarterback position does not become the variable that undermines everything else. That is why the Steelers will not gamble emotionally. They will not chase headlines. They will choose the option that best protects their competitive identity. That identity has always been rooted in trust. Trust that the quarterback will not put the team in bad positions. Trust that when the game tightens, the ball will go where it needs to go. Trust that situational football will be executed at a high level.